Hello, and welcome back to Telling the Bees. This week we're talking about bad moms, both in fiction and in nonfiction. We're talking about my viral video about my friends abandoned me when we had kids in the cut. Not that it went viral, we're talking about the discussion and all of the discussions that it spawned. It went a little crazy. Even in the original cut article on Instagram, they like post, the little Instagram thing with prompts for discussion. People went fucking nuts there. Honestly, the entire conversation is really scary, and yet here I am wading into it again. I'm just going to do a quick recap of that argument and then move on to some book recommendations on bad moms. It seems to be trending. There's a lot going on. And then I will also end with Love is Blind, my rant about this season that I haven't posted to TikTok yet, so you guys are hearing it first. And then I will end with White Lotus and a little bit less of a rant. But the season, I feel like a lot of people think that the season isn't giving, and I'm really into it. I can acknowledge that it is not at the same level as the previous season. I do think there was a really interesting Substack article that I will link that sort of lays bare the argument. Basically, it was saying that it's just very unsubtle. And yeah, anyway, this was a very long intro. Let's get into it. So I actually want to start out with if you follow me on Instagram, you know that I was teasing my Meghan Markle take. God, oh my God, it sounds like such an egotist. I'm teasing a take. But yeah, the Meghan Markle of it all, I think that I should talk about it because I do think that there's a lot going on there, sort of racially and politically and socially and sociologically. But I don't have like a bad take, right? I'm not going to sit here and be like, she fucking sucks, we should kill her. I think my take is more specifically that I don't know. I think she's a little bit annoying, but when I finish speaking, you will understand why I both think it, but I think it's fine. Like at the end of the day, it's not the hugest deal that she's not, the most palatable person, or palatable is the wrong word, but I think she's been through a lot. I think she's traumatized, and I think all of this is a sort of trauma response, and I'm not shocked that she acts the way that she does. So starting out at the very, very high level, Meghan Markle has been under a lot of controversy in the past couple of weeks. 2 weeks ago on Friday, her Netflix show premiered with Love Megan. She is now sponsoring, or she created this brand As Ever. I don't know if she got sued, but I will link the New York Times article. This man, this gay guy, is the founder of a brand also called As Ever, and he gave an interview to the New York Times basically just saying that she stole it from him, which, I'm so sorry, sister, I stand with you. But Meghan Markle did steal that man's brand name, and yeah, the entire conversation has been sort of spiraling on social media. I think something that's really interesting, and I ran into this with Sierra on Summer House, where I do think that black women like ride for Meghan Markle as they should, right? I just think that sometimes valid criticisms can get lost in we have to protect her of it all. I will start out with the explanation and then I'll go into like my take, right? So I think Meghan is obviously someone who wanted to be famous, right? She wanted to be an actress. That is what it is. That's not a bad thing. That's not a moral judgment on her. I think she has been terrorized by the media, and I don't think that we fully understand the extent of how deep her fear and horror and terror goes, right? Like the British royal family and the British media like savaged her. And I mean, we're all adults. We all remember this was 5 years ago. It wasn't that long ago, or 6 years ago. They started dating in 2016 and they got married in 2018. And I know those dates very well because I started grad school right before they started dating, and I ended grad school right when they got married. I think they got married in May or March or something. So they were together for a bit, but Meghan was savaged, right? We got articles all the time about how her avocado habit was bankrupting Mexico and like the country, and she was so mean to everyone that worked for her, and she was so mean to Kate, and she was the one who sort of snatched Harry. And it's very easy to like paint this image of her as this like Jezebel and harpy who snuck in there and stole their beloved prince, right? I think FKA Twigs in that infamous speech when she said he was their white Prince Charming and I was this evil girl and they wanted him to end up with someone who looked like them, right? There is a very, very serious racial element there that I don't think is possible to ignore, right? And it's my job to like call it out as someone who studied sociology. It's like very obvious that she's always on tenterhooks, right? She's someone who lives very defensively. I always talk about the defensive crouch. She's someone who permanently exists in this defensive crouch because she's so ready to be savaged by the media. And almost it's like a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where she released this show and then she was immediately savaged, right? Like it's not surprising, and I'm sure that she is filtering out whatever media she receives, but they got a second season order, so I guess it doesn't matter. But also the Mirror Ball situation. In case you don't know, Taylor Swift has a song called Mirror Ball, and it's this idea that I've talked about with reality stars where people who really, really, really desperately want people to like them are sometimes off-putting. So Sheena from Vanderpump Rules, Wendy Osefo from Real Housewives of Potomac. There are a couple of other ones, but there are people who just like you can see the naked need underneath and it like repels certain people, certain personality types, right? There are people who are a little bit more empathetic than I am, famously, and who are nicer than I am, famously, and will sort of ride with that personality type. I am not someone who can do that, I fear. I talked about this just now on TikTok when I was talking about Austin Butler. Austin Butler wants to be the most famous man in the world, and he needs it so badly that it's deeply off-putting. I feel the same way about Bradley Cooper and Leonardo DiCaprio. I think that if you need validation that badly, you are not to be trusted. I'm afraid of you. Like, I don't trust anyone that needs people to constantly clap for them and tell them how beautiful and special they are. And obviously, we're talking about Hollywood, right? So many of these people need it so badly, but a lot of them are really good at hiding it. And I think that's what I appreciate. Like, I like the performance of it all. I literally, when I talk about reality stars, and like someday I'll write about this in book form, maybe. But I like seeing the way that people construct themselves. I like seeing the way that people sort of play themselves, but I don't necessarily want the self that you play to be desperate and needy. It is very, very off-putting. And that tells you a lot about me, right? Oh my God, this just turned into like a therapy session. But that tells you a lot about how I feel whenever I make my videos dragging the anxiously attached, right? Like, I just think that there's something about neediness that is very, very off-putting to me and my personality type. For the astrology girlies, I have a Capricorn stellium. Every single one of my planets is in Capricorn except for my sun and rising. So that tells you everything you need to know. I have no water in my chart. I have no air in my chart. Every single thing is Capricorn. Anyway, that was a very long-winded way of saying that like Meghan's whole thing being so traumatized by this racist media industry that really fucking savaged her, right? Like really, really made sure that every single like 50-year-old white woman in England hated her guts, right? And even Bethany Frankel is like deeply triggered by her. They did a number on her, I'm sure, and now she's trapped in this permanent defensive crouch where she's like, the only thing I care about is to be as inoffensive as possible, right? Like the way that she dresses in these like neutrals and khakis and like the warmest brown you've ever seen, right? And even on the show when she's like, this is Zara, the way that she speaks, every single thing is constructed and performed to be as anodyne as possible. She wants to offend no one ever. And I think that's the sort of issue. One thing I will say, because I just saw that I forgot to say it in my notes, I think that blaming Meghan for Harry escaping is the wrong way to think about it. In Cheryl Strayed's book of advice, Dear Sugar, the advice column that they made into a show for Hulu randomly, she talks about the motorcycle, and the motorcycle fantasy is a fantasy that some people use. Sometimes it'll be an ex-girlfriend, sometimes it'll be the cabin in Vermont, sometimes it'll be I'm gonna move and change my name and like live on the coast of Mexico and like never speak to anyone again. It's this idea that sometimes there will be someone or something in your life that you use as an escape hatch, and when they get on the motorcycle, they drive away and they never look back, right? Meghan is Harry's escape hatch. He used her to get out of that family, right? The idea that she seduced him and like lured him away like some siren is absolutely false and just sort of ridiculous if you think about it for more than 3 seconds, right? Like he hates the media, or he hates the British media, let's say. He very much wanted to be away from like the Diana situation. He spent his whole life being raised in this public eye that wasn't flattering, right? It's not the same, it's sort of the same as we do here, but like British media is so much meaner. They were dragging him for so long and he was their beloved and he was their prince, but then it came a time where he was a little bit of a fuck up, right? He was stuck in this image of fuck up, image of younger son, image of loser, and he married a black American divorcee to get the fuck out of there, right? She was the motorcycle. She was the thing that he was using to escape. And I think a lot of people forget that. So looping all the way back around, she was the escape hatch. So Meghan wants to be as anodyne as possible. She wants to be as inoffensive as possible because she never ever wants to experience this like intense media criticism. And unfortunately, I think this is the double bind of like fame that I talk about a lot on TikTok. You cannot have that, I fear. Like it just isn't possible. I said this when I talked about Paul Mescal and his, little speech after his engagement with Phoebe Bridgers broke off, where he's like, why don't people respect my privacy? And then a year later, he's on the red carpet with Gracie Abrams. It's like, you cannot be as famous as these people and you cannot want it as badly as these people and not have any criticism, right? That's just it's literally impossible, and you cannot have it every single way, right? If Harry and Meghan really wanted to disappear and like move to Montecito and never be seen again, they would be, right? But unfortunately, you do not sign a $100 million Spotify deal and a $100 million Netflix deal and a $100 million deal with Penguin Random House or whoever published his memoir if you actually want to disappear, right? Like they very easily could have moved to like rural Maine and never be seen again, right? So again, it's a sort of situation of the lady doth protest too much where they want it so badly, but they also never want to be criticized. They never want to offend anyone, and they never ever want to like ruffle any feathers. And unfortunately, that's just not the way that the media works, right? The whole thing with Meghan is, and her content, right? You cannot have a point of view if you only create content for the lowest common denominator. That's why people hate her shows. That's why her website is kind of whatever. She's selling $20 jam and like blankets, but it's like you need to say something, right? If you read the Vanity Fair article that was very long and very interesting, but very long, so I know that a lot of people aren't going to like lock in. One of the issues that they talk about was the Spotify deal, and in case you don't know, they got like an $100 million Spotify deal. She made one podcast with 8 episodes about powerful women. And one of the issues with the podcast was that she never wanted to say anything bad, right? She had an episode about the word bitch and she never said the word bitch. She called it the B word and she like refused to say it on camera or on air, right? It's this idea that like again, as a content creator, right? God, I hate calling myself that, but here I am creating content. As a content creator, you need to have a point of view, you need to have some thought, you need to have some originality, you need to have some zest, you need to have some personality. Wanting to be the equivalent of paint drying and wanting to be the beigest and most bland. And I'm not saying that as like a beige insult. I'm saying it as like to be beige as in to not offend, right? It's all the stuff that I've been saying for 12 minutes now. You cannot, it can't work, right? You're creating nothing. You're creating nonsense. And I think that's why like a lot of these Amazon girlies, I'm mentioning a lot of articles, I have to write these down. The Amazon scandal from a couple of months ago where those two girls were suing each other over UGC and like creating Amazon storefronts, they were the same because they were the same, right? They are both selling like beige carpets and beige like stone pottery fake Amazon wares to like sell to their people, but all of the shit looks the same because it's created for no one. If it's created for everyone, it's created for no one, right? And that's been my issue with Marvel forever, where if you are creating it for every single person and you refuse to like take a stand on anything, then it's nothing. It doesn't matter, right? You're creating it for the lowest common denominator. And like no one is locking into With Love Megan. You know what I mean? It's a show created to be on like the dentist office and you're gonna smile at the TV and say, oh my god, she's so pretty. Like her life seems beautiful. But another one of the criticisms is that it's not her life. It's a set. There are so many layers of artifice that are going into this that it makes it seem even more delusional, where it's like you don't want to offend anyone, you don't want anyone to ever be mad at you, you don't want anyone to ever criticize you, and now you're filming in a fake house, you're filming with people that barely know you, pretending to be your friends, you're like pretending to cook this food. It's just there's so many layers to everything, where I think either the Vulture or one of the other reviews of the show said it is impossible to get to know her, where she's pretending that she wants us to get to know her, but you can't get to know her because everything, there's so many walls up, there are so many layers of constructed artificiality that it's a fortress. She's a fortress with good reason, right? Like she never ever wants to say anything that will hurt our feelings again, but like sweetie, you got to give us something. And I think that's the problem, where she doesn't want to take a step back. She wants to have like a media empire. She wants to be Oprah, I guess. But Oprah has a point of view, chooses, like, we can determine Oprah's politic and beliefs in the world through everything that she creates, right? She has a website, she has O Magazine. She has her book club where she picks very specific books, right? Oprah is not standing for everything and standing for nothing. Oprah is a person with a point of view who got famous on a talk show, right? Meghan got famous on a TV show and then married this guy and sort of circumventing the traditional being put through the ringer, right? And we see this with people who get famous really fast where they're not used to criticism, like Sydney Sweeney's Instagram meltdown a couple of years ago. I feel like I went on really long there, but to go back to the Vanity Fair article, there were some nuggets there. There was definitely some tea there, but I don't think anything is actually salient except for the fact that, and this is the harshest of my takes. I will post this on TikTok on Friday, so we'll see if I get dragged. But I think that the like harshest of the take is that Meghan and Harry are kind of losers, I fear. I'm sorry for saying it, but to be given $200 million and to create nothing. Harry, I guess, did do the Invictus Games documentary, which is very nice, and like I appreciate him and all of his work for the disabled community. But I think that we are sort of ignoring that, right? Like, I don't want Meghan to be the victim of racist hate and to be destroyed by, again, insane white moms who fucking hate her because she married Harry. But at the same time, we can call a spade and say that they were given a lot of leeway. And in the 5 years since they got all of these deals, they've produced basically nothing. Like, Harry ghost wrote a book and did 8 episodes of a podcast, and they did basically nothing on Netflix. Like, it is hard to not call out the fact that again, in the Vanity Fair article, they were like, they have a lot of ideas, but they can't commit to anything because, again, they want everything to be sort of bland and beige and average. And I think that there is an interesting story to tell, right? They can rail against the paparazzi, they can rail against the media, but again, you cannot be a creature of it and also criticizing it. Them deciding that they wanted to be famous more than they wanted to take a stand is, I think, the ultimate crux of the issue. They've created these golden handcuffs for themselves where now they are unable to take a step back and like actually analyze what they want because they think that they can just move to America and be media moguls. And I fear that that is not happening. I mean, I guess we'll see with the show. Maybe it'll be very successful. Okay. Coming back to my take, they're kind of losers, but whatever. Let them create their shows. At the end of the day, they're not hurting anyone, right? And thank you guys for listening to this incredibly nuanced take where, just to sum up, Megan is a victim. I stand with her, let her make her little shows. I don't think that they're like changing the world, and I don't think that they are capable of changing the world, but they seem sweet. They seem like they really love each other. I think that, like I posted on Instagram, I have to defend them because a, they are annoying, but what's the quote? Too often I find myself defending people I think are annoying from people I know are dangerous. People criticizing them and having this intense hatred for them is a little bit intense because they're just losers who live in Montecito, but like, it is not a crime to be a loser. It is not a sin to be annoying. I think we let them rock. Just let them rock. They're not doing anything. You know, literally, famously, they're literally not doing anything. Just let them not do anything in peace. And that's everything on Megan. A tight 15 on Megan. I wanted to also plug, I wrote about all of this on, well, not all of this specifically, but all of this kind of on Substack a couple of months ago. I wrote Who Gets to Be Annoying, where I analyzed the careers and trajectories of Anna Kendrick, Rachel Ziegler, and another female celebrity, and was sort of comparing J-Law, was it? Anne Hathaway. Oh my God, how did I forget? Anne Hathaway, and was sort of comparing and contrasting the way that they've been savaged by the media, right? This idea that whenever a woman is loud or whenever a woman has a voice, she has to be silenced. And like the only time we ever want to see women is when they're performing and twirling and being soft and nice and pretty. This is stuff that I talk about on TikTok all the time. It's deeply misogynistic and it's deeply fucked up. It's so annoying. Like to have to go through this hate cycle over and over and over again, right? In case you guys are not caught up, Rachel Ziegler is not allowed to talk to the press for her Snow White press tour. They are going to have press there, but she's not allowed to speak to them. And obviously Gal Gadot isn't either. A lot of people think that this is because of their political views. In Variety, they were talking about, you know, Rachel has been very pro-Palestine and Gal famously is from the IDF. So they're just sort of removing any and all potential for awkwardness by having them not speak to anyone at the red carpet. And also, this might be people like reading too much into it, but the movie's also bad, right? Like the thing that no one is saying is that the movie looks really bad, and they're just like, well, they're kind of just like throwing it to the wolves and letting it flop, and we'll never have to hear about it again. But I do feel bad for Rachel Ziegler because I don't know what devil she made a pact with. I said this on Substack. I'm like, I don't know what devil she made a pact with, but every single one of her projects there is a controversy. She has been unable to escape. I guess Hunger Games was the only one where she was just allowed to like be in the movie and not have to answer for anything. But every single movie that she's done, it's been a fucking scandal. It's so bad. She is so unlucky. The last thing I wanted to talk about was this culture of silencing women, even if we like them, right? So Jennifer Lawrence and Hathaway both had this happen to them where they were deemed Queen of America. We love them so much, American icon, American sweetheart. And then they did something. And J-Law is a little bit harder to defend because she was doing the whole cool girl thing where she's like, I love pizza and beer. But she also disrespected that Hawaiian statue. So I will not defend her on that. That was deeply culturally insensitive. But again, this idea of facing a backlash because they are women with voices is something that we really can't ignore, right? These are patterns. And again, sociology is a study of macros. So not every single situation is going to be an example of deep misogyny. But if every single time it happens and it's all of these different women, you know, it's hard to not point out the pattern and it's hard not to be honest when you see it. Moving on, doing a hard swerve into my friends abandoned me when they had kids. I don't think I have too much more to say about this. I posted a 5 minute long TikTok about it. It went viral. I did not expect it to go viral. I literally only posted about it because I posted on Instagram. This is the posting episode. I'm going to say the word posted every 30 seconds. I posted the original article on Instagram with a comment where I think everyone knows the thing that we're not supposed to say, but no one is saying it. And then I got 20 DMs of people being like, what's the thing? Just say the thing. So I said on TikTok that this country is fucked up and does not support mothers, which we know. It is more expensive and harder than ever to be a parent, which we know. Daycare costs are rising exponentially, which we know. This country has no maternity leave, depending on where you work. It's no federal maternity leave, right? Depending on your job, you can get decent maternity leave, but like not everyone gets it. And in Canada, they get a year. In the UK, they get 6 months. So it's very, 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 very hard to be a parent now. And I think couple of people on social media have been talking, like Chelsea Fagan of the Financial Diet was saying that a lot of people lose their identities to parenthood, to motherhood especially, which is definitely true. I didn't say it, don't come for me. But okay, so the thing that no one wanted to say, and I think what made the video go viral, was that a lot of people will get into relationships and just fully drop people. I said in the video, people jettison people much, much, much before they have kids, or much longer. Before they have kids, I don't know what the right wording there is, but like before they have kids, they're dropping people left and right. And I think any straight girls listening to this podcast, which I think is most of my audience, straight women fully and fundamentally understand this, right? The point of view of the parent is a little bit harder to reach because I don't think a lot of my audience is parents yet, but every single one of us has a friend who like dropped you when they got a boyfriend, man and woman, right? Like gay men included, gay women included, hell, everybody. Like we all know someone who got a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a partner and we never saw them again, right? There are people, and I do think unfortunately this is something that's more common with straight women, I will caveat that, but there are definitely straight women who are like, I only want to hang out with my boyfriend. A couple of weeks ago when I did my post on should your partner be your best friend, I was seeing comments where people were saying, I want to spend every single day with my boyfriend, I don't ever want to be without him, that's my man, that's my king. And I wrote about this in Boyfriend Land months ago, or I guess a year ago now. A year ago, TikTok has a infection. Pinks calls it boyfriend sickness. Sup calls it boyfriend psychosis. Someone needs to come up with a term because I don't know what it is. People are fucking obsessed with their boyfriends on TikTok. It is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Like, if you want to talk about boyfriend sickness, if you want to talk about losing your identity to a relationship and having your entire identity be girlfriend, it is scary. And it is every other trend. We get a trend. I can't even keep up with them. I used to keep up with them on a notes app, and I will plug Boyfriend Land in the show notes so you can click on it and see all the fucking trends that I named back then. It is madness the way that this country sort of sets up a system where so many women are claiming their identity and their goody points from being in a relationship. This is me coming from a place of academically trained sociologist noticing that this is a system of heteronormativity that creates this thing that tells women you are only someone, you are only important, and you are only someone if you have a boyfriend, right? I understand the underpinnings of it, but it is terrifying to watch. And so when I say a lot of people drop people when they are in a relationship, they're like, oh, well, I want to spend every day with my man, or oh, I'm only inviting couples on this thing, or oh, we're doing a couples trip, or oh, we're doing couples dinners. It's like, okay, I see what's going on here. Drag Race reference, Nina Bonina Brown. I see what's going on here. A lot of people will then have kids and say, where's my village? And it's like, you stopped hanging out with your village because you wanted to hang out with your man. Like, we just at some point have to call a spade and say that a lot of people in this country prioritize partnership over friendship. And I said that again when I did the Should Your Partner Be Your Best Friend video. A couple of weeks ago, I also talked about it on here. I don't remember what episode. They're all blending together, you guys. But I said it then, and I'll say it again. This country does not register friendship. This country does not care about friendship. This country treats friendship as a sort of nether space between when you're in your 20s and when you're in your 30s, and then you're supposed to meet someone and get married, and the nuclear family is the entire identity, right? And again, I linked to that on Substack, where the nuclear family sort of isolates people and creates a construct where you are not getting what you need because you're putting all of your resources into only the family, and you need to talk to your parents, you know what I mean? You need to talk to your friends, you need to talk to your cousins, you need community, you need extended family, you need community, you need a village, right? Like, I'm not coming for straight people, I'm not coming for your relationships, I'm not coming for parents. All I'm saying is that this country has set up a system where a lot of people are not able to access the things that they need because they're trapped in the suburbs with one person and two little kids. And then we wonder why we have a crisis of motherhood in this country. I did a whole post on motherhood book recs, which I will link in the show notes. But yeah, there's a lot of books about this idea where women will decide to stay home and then they go fucking crazy with their baby because it is hard. It is incredibly hard to just be alone with a baby. And I understand that it completely transforms you on a fundamental cellular level. There's so many millennial motherhood books that are like this is horrible and no one talks to me and I'm trapped alone in this house with a baby. That's why this country makes it incredibly hard and it sets up all of these roadblocks to actually creating community, right? And sorry that I went long there again. I was like, oh, this is just going to be a short recap of the video. What was surprising to me about the discourse was that people were really mad, right? This brings up a lot of hurt feelings on both sides, I think, where the parents were obviously furious and they were like, I didn't abandon you. This is the most important thing I've ever done. I'm raising humans, right? And the friends, the single people, the child free, I called them childless in the video and they got mad. The child free, apparently child free is when you don't have children by choice, and then childless is when you cannot have children by infertility. So thank you to whoever pointed that out to me. But the child free were a little bit miffed, and they were saying that their lives, when you center your life on community, and I understand how hard it is, right? Like, I was a gay man in my 20s. I was like, my friends are my family. This is going to be like, my friends. I was a gay man in my 20s. I said, my friends are my family, right? And then you have that thing in your late 20s where half of your friend group moves away, and then the other half, or like another 25%, get married. And then a couple of years later, another 25% have kids, and you're just like, okay, I see what's going on here. You have to keep making new single friends. You have to keep making friends that want the same things that you do, because otherwise there's nothing harder than, obviously I'm not comparing it to being a parent, don't bean soup, please, no bean soup. Obviously there's nothing harder than being a parent, but it is very hard to be the only single person in your friend group. It is very hard to be the only child-free person in your friend group. The isolation is real, and I have a lot of empathy for both sides. I don't want it to seem like I'm only caring about the like child-free person's perspective, even though I am child-free. It is that it is very hard and people are very angry. And so when you have comments both on the cut and on TikTok of people being like, why don't you come over and do my dishes? Why don't you come over and change my baby's diaper? I need the help. It's like, okay, well, we need to find another way to like establish community, because asking people to come over and do chores only makes that contingent of really crazy child-free people. You know who I'm talking about. Those people that are on Reddit and are like calling them breeder spawn and are like, why the fuck do kids exist? I never want to see them. Like, those people are maladjusted and deeply unwell. I don't trust them. But those people, of course, descended into the comments and were like, this is a choice you made. You knew how hard it was to have kids. Why the fuck would you do this? And so the comments just erupted. It was an absolute fucking mess. And I'm glad that I am no longer reading those comments and that they're starting to dwindle, because I was stressed. Going gently, a little bit more gently, into the bad mother phenomenon that we're currently seeing trending. Citing a couple of examples, I saw Gypsy on Broadway, famously one of the worst mothers in fiction. In case you don't know, Gypsy is the story of Gypsy Rose Lee, a young girl who has this gruesome mother named Rose, who wants her daughters to be in a sort of singing duo situation in like the 20s or the 30s or the 40s. It's an old show. I should know this. It's an old show, and they keep reviving it, and it's famously been played by like Patti LuPone and Bernadette Peters. So when her daughter is sort of unable to rise to the occasion, I don't want to actually spoil it, but it's the true story of a famous dancer, Miss Gypsy Rose Lee. I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but it is based on a true story, so it's kind of like a hard whatever. I'm not going to spoil it because I don't want to take that pleasure away from. But she has a really bad mom, and the mom sort of pressures her into doing things that she normally wouldn't do. Let's just say that. So, Gypsy, The Hills of California was on Broadway last year. It ended in December. I loved it. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. Now, after seeing it, I thought it was incredible. It's indelible. It absolutely moved me. But that was also about a gruesome mother pushing her children into show business. The House of My Mother on Hulu, the Ruby Frankie situation, absolute fucking nightmare. Like, that's terrifying to me that this woman was like the family vlogger of it all, to keep those kids in the house, to be punishing them using corporal punishment, to be involved in like a lesbian sex affair with a woman who came up through the sort of like rehab therapeutic boarding school industry, and then she would move into people's houses and convince them that their husbands were evil. And I don't know, just like very, very weird vibes. But like, she's also going to prison, thank God. But like, that's a bad mom. Sherry Frankie wrote the book, The House of My Mother, so I'll put that in the Instagram post for this in the show notes. I'm glad my mom died. Obviously, that was a couple of years ago, but that was trending. That's like still like one of the biggest books on audiobooks and on Amazon to this day. Selma Blair wrote a book about her own relationship. It was supposed to be a memoir, but it was actually about her relationship with her mother. She just didn't know it. She was the lobster in the pot where she very much was in it. She was too in it to see it. And finally, I do think that there is a thing about like monstrous women, right? The idea, I'm thinking of Lucille Bluth. I'm thinking there's so many examples from fiction of just like deeply bad moms, right? These women who don't care about their kids. There is something so haunting about it. And I do think that it resonates with fiction. I think this sort of ties in nicely with what we were talking about like earlier with the idea of the unruly woman, right? Where before, when you talk about Meghan Markle or Jennifer Lawrence or Anne Hathaway or Rachel Ziegler, you're talking about women who are deemed annoying because they're speaking, because they're loud, because they're speaking in ways that they shouldn't be, because they're saying things that they shouldn't be saying, according to like men and the patriarchy. And with these women, it's again sort of they're an aberration. They're seen as an aberration of nature. And the stories resonate so much because they are acting in ways that we don't expect, right? The idea of woman as like caregiver and nurturer is so ingrained in like all of society that to have all of these women be monstrous is a little bit intense and a little bit hard to both shake and swallow, right? It is hard to resonate with media that portrays a woman behaving like this, right? And then it's also hard to forget. It is hard to move on because you're so haunted by it. I know that in Monsters by Claire Detterer, I'm going to read that for my book club next, so spoiler. I know that she talks about how hard it is to be a woman artist, to be a female artist, to be woman as artist, and it's a very specific thing, like woman as an artist, right? I'm not like demeaning her by saying woman. I'm saying that, like, for her, she was writing about the separation between being a woman and being an artist and how hard it is to be both, right? And we saw that in Liars by Sarah Manguso. We've seen it in a couple of other millennial motherhood novels where creative people will sort of lose themselves to motherhood and it's hard for them to see the way out, right? And again, famously, I'm not a woman. I'm not speaking for these people. All I'm doing is interpreting the media that they put out. They are telling us in blaring giant red letters, it is hard for me to be both an artist and be a woman, and or to be an artist and be a mother, and that is all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's impossible. Please, please do not attack me. Ultimately, I do think that there is something interesting there because in examining the bad mother, you're sort of able to examine your own ideas and biases about what a woman should be, right? Even looping back around to what we were saying earlier, like when you think Megan is annoying, then it's like, then what are women supposed to be like, right? When you think, oh, but this woman is supposed to be gentle, this woman is supposed to be sweet, this woman is supposed to be kind, what are you actually saying? Why are you believing that there's only one way to be a woman? Why are you believing that there's only one way to be a mother? All of this stuff is really potent. All of this stuff is really ripe and intense for societal examination. And it's hard to like look away from it, right? That's why I keep bringing up the indelibility of it because there are so many examples and it's so hard to sort of remove them from your mind. I think that's that on the bad mother trending right now in fiction and nonfiction. There's definitely a societal conversation there, but like I just said, I think ultimately it's a conversation about misogyny and societal expectations and the sort of complications of losing yourself to motherhood, losing yourself to an identity that you perhaps did not want or perhaps you did want, and that makes it even harder to lose yourself, right? This was something that you were clamoring for and asking for, and now to have your life fundamentally altered by it, I can see why it would be devastating and honestly intense and weird. Ending there on motherhood, obviously I'm on all of these platforms. Just leave a comment if you have a question or you want to chat more about it. Doing a moratorium on this season of Love is Blind is a little bit hard because the season was so bad, but I think it was all building up to, if we're giving the editors a little bit of credit, I think it was all building up to this idea of it being a Trojan horse, right? I think it was selling us one thing, but ultimately this was a season about how deeply deceptive men are and how rotted the dating pool is right now. I am so afraid for women. I'm so afraid for these women in Minnesota, child. I'm spooked. Devin lying about his politics and Virginia having to sit at the reunion and be like, I believe in gay rights. I believe that Muslim people should have rights. I believe in marriage equality. And Devin sort of sitting there being like, I'm not going to respond to that is terrifying, right? I don't know what terrifying Christian sect of conservativeness he belongs to, but I don't ever want to see him or his hairline again. I wanted to be nice and I didn't want to make fun of his hairline, and look at this. I knew it. I should have just gone for it. When in doubt, be mean. Ben lying about his politics, we already talked about. Him pretending not to know what Black Lives Matter was. Him sort of sitting there and saying, I didn't know that my church hated gay people. Girl, yes you did. I wrote about this on Substack. It's called Red Team, Blue Team, but yes you did. There's no way that you didn't, right? This is absolutely a ploy to refuse to take accountability for the fact that you belong to this church, and that, like Sarah said, he was so much more religious than she knew about because he was lying about it. This was a season about men lying to everyone's faces. For this season of Love is Blind, honestly, T, like the girls all banded together and formed a sisterhood, well, except for Meg and Madison, formed a sisterhood and were able to like put their differences aside and really sort of drag these men and take them to task. Whereas the boys, the men, were pigs and liars. And Joey being a loser, that hair, the skateboard, lying about being a good guy, not liking Monica the entire time. Just, I said it. I want to point to the evidence. I said it from episode 1. I said he does not like her. He is not attracted to her. They have negative sexual chemistry. You know when two people like each other. I mean, I don't even believe that Taylor and Daniel like each other, but that's besides the point. You know when people don't like each other, and Monica deluding herself into believing it because he let her and he lied to her. It's so humiliating. Like, to go to the altar to say no, I feel so bad for her. Honestly, poor thing. And then DMing Madison, like, the rumors now on TikTok are that he's dating Sarah, which is, again, Sarah, I don't want to come for a woman, but it is giving performative. It's giving a little bit performative that she didn't want to marry Ben because of his politics and his religion, and then turn around and wanted to date him anyway. He was going to move with her to Nashville off camera. Like, girl, what if you had stayed together, what would we have taken away from that? That you didn't want to marry him on camera, but now you were actually down to clown off camera? Let's reconsider that one, sister. And now potentially dating Joey? Oh my God, my heart. I want to throw up. He sucks. And DMing Madison and then trying to get away with it by being like, I was just being nice, I was just being friendly, is so ridiculous. And as a man, I can see through the ploy. I know that he's lying, you know? For once, I get to use my male privilege for good. He's absolutely lying, and he absolutely DM'd her because he wanted to hook up. He's sick. I was going to say on a sentence level. On a scene by scene level, this was a genuinely bad season of the show. 6 episodes in the pods, leaving us with this ragtag bunch of freaks and losers. I have never been more disappointed. I literally started this podcast to talk about Love is Blind and White Lotus, and now both seasons are, we'll get to White Lotus, but this was just absolute trash. It's honestly shocking. I'm glad to be putting a pin in it. I'm glad to say the theme of this season was men lying and the conservative takeover of America. But besides that, I can't do it. I don't know if I can do next season. I'm gonna try, obviously, of course, but we'll see. Finally, moving on to White Lotus. Every week I talk about my 3 gossiping divas, and every week I lock in even more. I do think that there's a really interesting story there. I just did an interview with Lee Stein, who wrote Self-Care, which was about wellness and the girl boss era. Her new novel is coming out in August, and she's talking about millennial aging. The main character is 39, and I'm a millennial, she's a millennial, so we just did an interview on Substack, I'll link to that in the show notes, where we talked about millennial aging and this intense anxiety, right? I said that perhaps our controlling our mechanism of aging, right, with Botox and filler is a sort of transferred form of economic anxiety where we can't control the future, we can't buy houses, we can't get married, everything is so expensive, we can't afford to have kids, everything is just crashing down around us. And so the one thing we can control is our attractiveness and our appearance. And Lee smartly said that especially for women, like millennial white women and women who are middle class and upper middle class, and are able to sort of control their aging through these procedures, or not procedures, like injections, I guess, Botox and filler. But it's also because they don't want to lose their attractiveness, right? If we live in a society, sort of what the substance said, if we live in a society where beauty equals goodness and beauty equals youth and youth equals power, then it stands to reason that people don't want to lose their power, right? In a society that tells you if you're young, you're pretty, and if you're pretty, you're young, and if you're young, you're important and powerful. Of course, a lot of people are going to be like, I don't want to fucking lose that by turning 40 or 41 or 45. So Jacqueline absolutely losing her mind at being branded an old lady, like being sent to the old person's resort. I think it was like a double whammy of A, being bothered, right? Because at the White Lotus, everyone knows she's a celebrity, so they're not going to like come up to her and talk to her. So A, being bothered, B, being seen as old, which was obviously the real thing, right? It was very unsubtle that we saw her call the husband who's younger, and he didn't pick up, and then she just kept checking her phone, and then she spiraled this day. This episode definitely does feel like the half of a two-parter. It doesn't feel like we landed the plane on any of the storylines, so I'm not really going to talk about a lot of the other storylines because, like, I like to examine things as a narrative. I like to examine things as a whole, and there's not a lot there. But Jacqueline's terror at being seen as old, where she's like, we're young, we're fun, we're hip. It's like, oh my God, nothing makes you look older than saying you're young, I fear. Except for when I say it, because I am young-ish. I don't know, I feel young sometimes. Yeah, like I said, the rest of the episode felt like half of a two-parter. The rat lifts, Lord, I don't know what's going on. The dad losing his mind is interesting because I do think that there's a thread there of him losing the idea of himself, right? The same as Rick. I think that they're still continuing to be foiled, like I said in my first episode, based on their first episode. I think that the Amrita conversation saying you are still capable of change is fascinating because, again, I think that they're still twinning their storylines. The dad is Timothy is seen as a Boy Scout. Every single episode we get Victoria saying he is a good man, he is a good father, he is a provider, he's a pillar of the community. We see him say it on the boat, right? I'm a pillar of my community. I'm a well-respected gentleman. I am someone important where I come from. And now the truth is coming. The truth is coming out that he's a tax cheat and a liar and a fraud. And he's freaking the fuck out. He's overdosing on lorazepam, just like trying to get through the next 4 days in a stupor. It's hard. And like Rick sort of portraying himself as like this loser. He's like, I'm not capable of goodness. I'm not capable of change. I'm never going to be able to change myself and get out of that is interesting because now he's going to go terrorize someone in Bangkok. He's going to go see what he's going to see. I'm not super interested in the storyline. I think it's fairly obvious that the dad is Hollinger. Like, obviously, as soon as they said it, I was like, okay, that's the dad. But again, this idea that you are potential, you are able to change, that there is potential there with him sort of changing his idea about himself is interesting because Timothy is a good man gone bad. And now we're going to see if Rick is able to be a bad man gone good. The last thing that I wanted to say about White Lotus is people talking a lot about this season being a slow burn. I will again link to that Substack, but I don't know, maybe because I'm doing this podcast, like maybe I'm interested and intrigued and sort of paying a lot more attention than I normally would be. The episodes are slow, but I'm very locked in. I'm very intrigued. I'm very into them. I think that the season is giving. I think that it is a slow burn, but like the storylines will pay off. I don't know. I just have a feeling that they're going to pay off. I think that there is something that they're building to, and I think that the third episode was slow on purpose. I think this episode was slow because it was supposed to be linked with the other one. I wish that HBO had let them just do like a 2 hour like long episode or a 90-minute long special episode, but I guess that they wanted to keep it in the can to be able to do 9 or 10 or however many episodes they're doing this season. I do think it's slower. I do think it is less subtle, but I do think that when we reach the end, there will be narrative payoff and there will be a conclusion that is worth the slowness. I hope that that makes sense. As always, thank you guys for listening. I deeply, deeply appreciate it. Every single one of your comments means the world to me. We're on week 4, 4 weeks left of these special dispatches, of the special episodes of this special podcast. But yeah, thank you as always for listening. This is Telling the Bees, and I appreciate you guys. I will see you on the web.